Thank you. All right. Hi, good afternoon. My name is Chris Roney. I'm the General Counsel at the Finance Authority of Maine. With me I have Adele Bickford, she's my assistant. We're here today to conduct a public hearing at 3:06 on June 17th, 2015, pursuant to Title 10 of the Maine Revised Statutes annotated Section 1043. All parties in attendance at the hearing have been requested to sign the attendance log. This public hearing is being held for the purposes of considering a certificate of approval for Casella Waste Systems, Inc., or its affiliates, collectively we'll refer to them as the company, for a project that involves capital expenditures by the company at many of its business locations throughout the state. We're going to call that the project. The project consists of the financing of certain costs relating to certain of the company's solid waste landfill facilities and solid waste collection, organics, transfer, recycling, and hauling facilities, including the costs of new recycling processing equipment and infrastructure, landfill gas treatment infrastructure, transportation equipment including solid waste and recycling collection vehicles, solid waste and recycling collection containers and compactors, certain landfill development costs at the company's currently permitted landfill sites, including landfill cell development and liners to create additional disposal capacity, and costs of general improvements, including various upgrades to leachate collection and monitoring systems, methane gas collection systems, paving and grading and other infrastructure improvements, building, land, leasehold, and infrastructure improvements, and other machinery, equipment, furniture, fixtures, and other items of tangible personal property, all of which aforementioned projects and assets are located or to be located at and operated from and at one or more of the project locations, which I'll identify in a moment. The project shall also include any installation, development, design, engineering, replacements, demolition, improvements, equipment, construction, renovation, structures, permitting, and capital expenditures that were or will be undertaken or incurred to accomplish the foregoing. The project locations, the addresses were listed on the legal notice, the exact addresses, but they're located in the towns of Bethel, Hamden, Herman, Holton, Lewiston, Mars Hill, Mechanics Falls, Old Orchard Beach, Old Town, Saco, Scarborough, Unity, Waterville, West Bath, and Westbrook. The company proposes to finance its project through the issuance of revenue obligation securities in an amount not to exceed $30 million. Notice of the public hearing was published in the Kennebec Journal, Waterville Sentinel, Bangor Daily News, Lewiston Sun Journal, Portland Press Herald, Brunswick Times Record, and Biddeford Journal Tribune on June 1st, 2015. Casella Waste Systems, Inc. has certified that it has notified its in-state competitors of this hearing and has provided proof of the same. The company has submitted its sworn application dated November 11th, 2014, and also submitted copies of letters signed by representatives of each of the municipalities in which the project is located, addressing the impact, if any, the project will have on the public facilities in such municipalities. The Maine Department of Environmental Protection has issued its written assessment dated June 10th, 2015. Prior to this hearing, no comments, either written or oral, were received from interveners or other interested parties on the project, except that several individuals did call or email the authority to indicate that they intended to attend today's hearing or requested a copy of the legal notice of hearing. And except further that Mr. Poppy from Mainly Recycling called to voice opposition to the project, mainly based on its view that the company was large and generally acted in a way that made competition with them difficult, and the state, quote, rolled out the red carpet for them. At this time, I'm going to open the public hearing for proponents of the project who wish to comment, and they are asked to identify themselves and speak as we're making a tape recording of the public hearing. So is there anybody that's a proponent of the project that would like to speak?
Yeah, I would like to speak. For instance, Ned Coletta, the CFO of Casella Waste. As we've laid out, we have necessary infrastructure throughout the state of Maine, and the federal government has created a solid waste disposal revenue bond structure to enable tax-exempt financing to finance such infrastructure. We've successfully used such bonding in the past. As you well know, FAME is a conduit issuer. There's no backing by the state of Maine for these bonds. There's no backing by FAME for these bonds. They're the sole obligation of Casella. And the reason we're going through this process is just as the conduit issuer, you guys handle the volume cap and the inducements for such bonding. This money is going to be used mainly for existing operations. The one new piece of infrastructure we're funding with some of these proceeds is a new Lewiston zero sort recycling MRF, which is the first of its kind in the state and allows us to process commingled recyclables and is really adding to the state's material management plan as outlined. We're also looking to invest in CNG fueling infrastructure in the state to get cleaner trucks and reduce our emission profile. Some of these proceeds will also go to our gas treatment infrastructure at the Juniper Ridge landfill. We just put in a state-of-the-art treatment facility that's allowing us to drastically reduce emissions and will allow the gas to be clean enough to be used in energy production, which would be a big benefit. And then the majority of the capital, as you laid out, is going towards recurring business needs. We have roughly 360 employees in the state of Maine, $100 million of revenue, and we're servicing any number of residential, municipal, and commercial customers throughout the state. We have ongoing capital needs to continue to service those customers in an environmentally safe manner. And with that, I guess I'll see Don or Dave. Do you have any additional comments?
I don't, but Don Mahar with Casella, and I work primarily out of the closed Hanbin landfill, which is one of the facilities identified here, and the Juniper Ridge landfill.
And did you have something else?
Yeah, and I'd like to put into the record, there were several questions you had posed. The first was whether the project would result in any detriment to existing businesses in the state. And then you had posed the question, in the case of recycling and waste reduction projects, would the project support the state waste management plan? And then you had posed a question around how do the projects make an economic contribution to the state and public benefit? And you had proposed some responses to those questions.
Is there anybody else in favor of the project that wants to speak? Okay, is there anyone here who would like to speak in opposition to the project? Why don't you come ahead and,
Sure.
you can get recording.
My name is Ed Spencer. I live in Old Town, about a mile and 3/4 from the Juniper Ridge landfill, which is, of course, state-owned, operated by Casella. And I first got involved in this in 2003 when I found out that our mill landfill was being turned into basically a commercial landfill without any input from the public. The rationale was to help the paper mill at the time stay in business. And that opened my eyes to the whole process. And I've seen that right from the beginning. I don't think Casella has played fair with the state. And I think at first the state was so afraid of losing the paper mill that they cooperated pretty much fully with Georgia Pacific and Casella. And for example, when this plan was brought up, there was a request for proposals put out. And one of the requirements was that the bidders would post a $50 million bond. So Casella ended up being the only bidder, and they never posted the bond. There was a lot of, there was, I've got email right here between a woman named Betty Lamoro in state government to another one named Rebecca White, who is still, I don't know what Mrs. Lamoro does still, but anyways, saying that basically, what can we do here, because this Casella is refusing to post the bond, and we think this is illegal, so that ended up being, I think Casella posted like a $4 million bond. They talked various people in state government thinking that was okay, but what happened was the deal had already been done. It was all over the press, that mill will be saved, and then the details, when push came to shove, Casella didn't do the $50 million bond. Well, I'm not saying there was anything illegal about that or anything, but I am saying that I don't, for this and for many, many other reasons, I don't think the state should be helping Casella. I think it's time for Casella to help themselves, to act in their own interests, which they always seem to do, and to avail themselves of private capital, other investors. So I basically, I don't think it's a good idea to loan them money. And one of the reasons is, I've been trying, as you know, Mr. Lilly, I've been trying to get information about the status of a former FAME-backed arrangement. I think it was in the amount of $25 million from 2005, I believe, and whatever became of that. And the last, so I'm asking for an answer to that from somebody.
Well, I guess I'll speak, because it's not really a question-answer format here.
Oh, okay,
You have an opportunity just to voice your
Okay.
opinion
Yeah.
for or against the project.
yeah,
And I guess I would point out that I do believe the prior FAME bond is still outstanding. But I would also clarify that, as in this particular facility, it's, when I say facility, I mean lending facility, not operating landfill facility, but it's not a FAME loan. They are accessing private capital, with FAME being simply a conduit passed through, and they don't take any responsibility or liability, either on behalf of ourselves or on behalf of the state, with respect to the project.
so the state has no exposure to that,
That's correct.
that former or to this?
That's correct.
Is there a limit to the amount of these financing that FAME can offer to businesses?
There is, again, not necessarily relevant for the purposes of the public hearing, but I'll
Yeah.
answer just to be courteous.
Right.
There is, the federal government gives a certain amount of tax exempt bond allocation, it's called, to each state. And Maine gets a fair amount of it, in excess of $250 million a year.
Okay.
And so part of what FAME does is allocate some of those essentially federal tax benefits.
Yep.
So this comes out of that portion.
Yeah, I just, I'm sorry, and it's nothing personal with you guys, but I've just seen the history of Casella and, broken promises, and I just don't think we should do anything to help them.
Could I know it's not a question and answer,
If
but
you-
can I
if I
respond,
just-
if you don't mind?
Sure.
And we haven't met before, and I wasn't with the company at that point in time, so I can't speak fully to it, but I think culturally, as an organization, that we do try to have deep roots in the community, and we do try to do well, but by our community sponsors and host communities, and regards to several of the points you laid out, as Chris said, the state nor fame is loaning us any money. It will all be a conduit issuer. Bank of America is the banker on this, and they will sell these bonds to either qualified institutional buyers. Casella is going to be the guarantor on the bonds, and any solid waste business who's making qualified capital expenditures in the state has the ability to come to fame and work through the same process. We did it, as you recognized, back in 2005, and it's a capital-intense industry to service both recycling and solid waste needs, and it's a mechanism for us to raise capital to pay for that infrastructure. I think I'd leave it at that it's a level playing field, and we're not getting any advantage that anyone else is in.
Right, so in other words, that the only potential negative effect would be on the competitors, or who have not, except for the one person who, didn't show up and voiced some opposition, or to, if the state has had its limit for the federal tax breaks. And I understand that competition is one criteria for this, and for fame to evaluate the application. And I've been reading this. This is a newspaper story from 2011 in Vermont, and it says Casella to pay $1 million penalty for anti-competitive contracts with customers. And to me, I haven't heard of this happening in Maine, but it was basically, I could read it into the record if you like, but basically they had a 2002 agreement Casella did with the Vermont Attorney General, designed to protect consumers from anti-competitive service contracts. And then in 2009 and 2010, Casella basically continued these practices which they had agreed to stop. And Casella's answer was that the different branches of the company weren't talking to each other, so whoever was in charge never said to the people who send out the contracts to the customers that to put out to stop, including clauses that requires that the customer give Casella a notice of termination more than 30 days prior to the end of the initial term or renewal term. So to me, these guys are based in Vermont, and this is how they're treating their own customers. And, they say it was just, a misunderstanding, but to me, maybe in 2002 it was a misunderstanding. By the time this happened, 2,400 contracts. I don't think that's a company that's desirable to have, and this is their home state. That Vermont is their home state. So I find that bothersome, and I've listened to people say things in public hearings that just flat out weren't true. Like, for example, when they brought it into Old Town, when they became operators, and this became state-owned Casella-operated landfill, they said, there will be no out-of-state waste in this landfill. Now, at the time, the definition was kind of nebulous on that, but when they said that, they stood right there and said that. Them and their attorneys. They had a contract, they had an agreement with the state planning office that authorized them to bring in out-of-state waste. And the excuse was to make clean, wood-fueled energy for the paper mill, to make them more competitive. And the other thing, when they finally did furnish some of this fuel, over half the samples tested bad. They weren't clean. They were in violation of the test limits. So, I mean, that's, I'm opposed to helping them out, you know. I mean, we've got obligations with them that are legal, that are binding, and we go with that. But, and just the history has not been good, and I'd like to think they're changing, but I don't know. They seem to be a little bit too, to me, I'm the smallest of the small businessmen. I'm a lawyer and former tree surgeon. And it sounds to me like this is just like operating capital. You know, it doesn't sound like a real project investment that's going to bring a lot of new jobs. It's gonna, you know, I'm sure it strengthens their hand, but it, I don't know, it's not specific enough for me, and I don't know how the state can require that this money really be spent on the main operations. I mean, how is that documented? I don't have confidence that way. You know, I'm concerned about the financial viability of Casella as a whole, which I don't know what their bond rating is now, or I know it's been not that great in the past. So I guess that's basically it. I mean, I could keep us here for hours, the whole litany of complaints about, you know, our experiences with them, and I don't think that's necessary at this point. I think it's just important to come down here, and I commend you for having a public hearing where people can voice opposition or support. So I guess, but this isn't a question and answer.
No.
I guess, all right, how can I phrase it then? Bank of America, okay, so Bank of America has made a commitment to issue these bonds. I take it. And I also noticed, and I'm not sure, I have my degree is in religious studies, so I have no background in finance, except I am solvent small businessman myself. And this is under the Revenue Obligation Securities Program.
Yes.
Well, it says, I think it says somewhere in here that the maximum amount for that is, may not exceed $25 million. So that kind of caught my eye. I think there's a chance that with their activities at Juniper Ridge, if they expand the landfill there, but some of these monies will go to that. I'm really concerned about environmental degradation on a major scale. Not so much in my time, but I've got a 6-year-old granddaughter, a 3-year-old granddaughter, and another one that's due pretty much any day now. Now, their great-grandmother just celebrated her 100th birthday. And with advances in medicine, health, these little girls have a chance of doing that. And I'd like them to enjoy a world free of mountains of toxic waste. And where we are now, we had May 11th what was that, a month and a week ago, we had a trash truck, tractor trailer, bound for Juniper Ridge, catch on fire. First in Newport, on the interstate. They did their best, put it out, continued on its way up another 35, 40 miles, so it almost made it to the exit. In flames again, so the Old Town and the local volunteer departments went out, put thousands and thousands of gallons of water on it. It was still smoldering. They dragged it in there and spread it out on the place for the hot loads. Now, they say there's not supposed to be any hazardous waste going in. And I guess this didn't meet that criteria, didn't violate that somehow. But to me, if that truck happened once, it can happen again. And it's just a threat to the community. The smells from the trucks, the odors coming off the place. And we went to a public information session this last week where they laid out the expansion plans and the, and question and answers, good session for the public and everything. But I just, the threat of having it, there's already this huge pile there. It's already about the size of the Hamden landfill. Permitted to be another half that size. If they expand it, it'll be 3 times the size of the Hamden landfill. And it's just so out of character for Maine, and I know that, a lot of that stuff doesn't come from in-state Maine. Technically, maybe it does, but practically speaking, I don't think so. So, I'm an opponent. I'm not, I fell trees for a living, so I'm not just a tree hugger, and, but something like this, I feel, is a threat, both in the present and more likely in the future. So I feel if I don't speak up now, I've opposed many measures that Casella has tried, including and taking it to the BEP where I always lose. But I just think at one point at one time they'll be saying, oh, we support the state waste hierarchy, and then they do everything they can to just bring straight curbside garbage up from southern Maine without no sorting, no taking the metals out like they did when they owned the Biddeford incinerator. I don't know, I guess maybe I just live too close to the place to have a positive view of the company. I'm gonna stop there, okay? But like I said, I appreciate your time in coming here, listening to me. And I guess in closing, I'll say, at that information session, there was, half a dozen or so Casella employees there, and I'm civil with all of them. And they kept repeating, we're doing the best we can. We're doing the best we can out there. We understand it still smells sometimes. It's still, the street plates. Yeah, but we're doing the best we can. I kind of take them at their word. And illustrates the problem. They are doing the best they can, but it still smells. You don't know when you're going to be woken up in the middle of the night because that thing burps or the flare goes out or there's some problem. You get the windows open in the summer and those odors come wafting in and you don't know what's in there. And I tell you what, it's a horrible situation. Now they've managed to go by DEP rules, to, not be nuisance odors, but I'm telling you what, if your family isn't comfortable sitting outside having a barbecue because the odor's coming off that thing, that's trouble, as far as I'm concerned, and that is a nuisance no matter what. anybody else says. So I just don't think they're worthy of helping. I hope their expansion plan fails. And we can just close the thing down and, hope for the best outcome that way. And I think, yeah, I guess that's it. Any questions for me? Do they get to respond to me or anything?
Yeah, it's not like question and answer period, it's an opportunity for people to voice their opposition or support for it. Appreciate your comments and thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you
appreciate
for
your time.
coming and
Yeah.
sharing.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else here who's wishes to speak in opposition to the project?
I'd like to say a few words, if I could. Thank you. I wasn't sure if I would have a chance to speak or not. My name is Maria Schwartz, and I live in Orono. And I have been involved for probably the past 8 years now with a watchdog group in Old Town, Orono, Penobscot Nation, that's been trying as best we can to monitor the happenings at Casella. And I just want to share that there's strong opposition to their expansion. And there's so much going on, and I understand the legalities around publishing your notices of meetings and hearings and all of that. But frankly, it's just really hard to keep up with all of that. There's so much going on in the state. And one of the primary concerns I've heard expressed, and the concern that I have mostly about Juniper Ridge landfill, is its location in the wetland. It's situated on a ridge between two bogs and between two major streams that flow into the Penobscot River, directly above Indian Island, Penobscot Nation. And I'm just not confident about the company's ability to protect the water, the groundwater, the surface water. The plight of water all over this world is, extreme danger, and we need to really assure that we're doing everything possible to protect our resources here. And frankly, I think Juniper Ridge has gotten too big as it is. I hope the hell you don't get an expansion. There's many people that feel the same way, and I just feel that I don't have a full understanding of things financing, but it seems to me it could go towards better things than towards expanding this mountain of stinking trash that's sitting in the wetland. And that is our primary concern. Thank you.
Thank you.
Actually, why don't, you want to go last, right? Paul should go last. You should, because you know the most. I'll go in. I'll go in.
Thanks.
I'll go in.
Yeah, thanks, Sam.
Yeah, Sam. Yeah, they call me Mr. Diplomacy. I'm Sam Hunting. I live in Orono. I guess I drink from the still water, and I drink from the Penobscot. So I guess that's how I think of protecting the watershed from the dump. Let's see here. I guess I've got basically 5 things I'd like to say. I'm listening to the proposal, and I'm reading the legal advertisement, and it seems to me that we're sort of mixing together or commingling operating expenses and capital, right? And, it seems clear that like new recycling and processing equipment and infrastructures, that's a capital investment, everybody knows that. But I go on and I read and I see like recycling collection containers, like the green things, trucks, those are just operating expenses in my book, at least in my tiny little business they are. And so I'm sort of confused about the status of the financing, and the short explanation I was given didn't really help me. It feels to me like we're getting into the business of helping or we're getting into the business of being a conduit for a solution to solving Casella's cash flow problems, and that sort of doesn't make me feel real good. I see, the second thing is, I didn't hear in the proposal given, anything about an audit to make sure that Casella is actually spending the money as they claim they're going to under the description of the project. Casella has a very, very bad history about making commitments to the people of the state of Maine and not following through on them. And I see no reason to believe that absent some sort of auditing facility, Casella will not run true to type and do the same thing again. It's like the classic case is the tomatoes that were gonna grow in the landfill. Didn't happen. The third point is, I'm worried about an audit facility because when I Google the FAME website, right, I don't find anything about Casella at all. Right? And I know Casella's gotten money from FAME already, and why is this material not available in a place where a member of the public would reasonably expect to find it? The fourth point is, frankly, I don't see why the state of Maine or FAME should be giving its imprimatur to Casella for any purpose whatsoever. Ed has given a fine explanation, which could be greatly expanded, of why the reputational damage for FAME and the state of Maine is great for having any business involvement with them at all. And the final point, and I'm not a lawyer or anywhere near a lawyer, so I'm trying to, I gotta be reading chapter 202 to understand how these revenue obligation securities program works, am I right?
Yes, that's part of it.
Okay, I know, or at least I've been told, that there's no money at stake here for the state of Maine. And I'm not sure what this conduit thing might mean, and I'll have to go look at that to get my own independent understanding of it. Nevertheless, what I would like to understand, this project as described sounds very much like a major business expansion project, right? No?
It's not, no.
Okay. Then what is it, if I may ask?
It is a conduit project, for one. It's a solid waste facility. It is, the major business expansion project is a program that FAME is responsible for the credit enhancement for. So that's it's a different project. This is not that. This is a project that could be of any size permitted by federal tax law. And subject to it, because as I stated before, FAME is not taking any credit risk or credit, not credit enhancing, or is not providing funds for any of the projects.
Where would I go to find the criteria
The
for
criteria-
approving
The
this project?
criteria and
Under what clause, just out, like, for my own edification?
well, you're only looking at part of it because that's the rule that interprets some of the
Okay,
statutory
super.
provisions that apply. That you find the criteria later on, and specifically, so section 4 talks about the public hearing, section 5 talks about whether the project contributes to the economic growth of the state and other contributions. Section 6 talks about the finding the absence of detriment. And those are the primary findings that are set forth in that rule, but you really have to look at section 1043, which are the main statute, Title 10 of the main statutes to find and very specific findings that have to be made.
And are there additional, if I may ask, are there additional regulations that clarify the
No.
statute?
No,
That's it? Wow, okay. All right, then I can't make the argument I wanted to make, so I'll just, on the basis of the statute rules. What I will say though, is that what this feels to me is, for some reason, Casella's using the state of Maine to dig it as a shovel to dig itself out of the jam. What this looks like to me is we're solving their cash flow problems. Or perhaps we're making it easier for Casella to sell a piece of its business to private equity out of state, right? I don't see any reason why Casella can't be operating like a normal business entity and funding its own expansion and its own operating expenses out of its own business. I don't see why it has to go through this process at all. So those are my statements. If I didn't say I oppose this project with every fiber of my being, I have said it now.
Anyone else?
Right, thank you. I think most of my question, I will have questions about the process and documentation. My name's Paul Schrader. I live in Orono. I was listening as you read at the beginning from the notice. Did you say something about letters from municipalities?
Yeah.
I must have missed that. Is there a letter from, are all the municipalities who are involved in this submitting letters of some sort of support on this, or I didn't quite catch what you said?
Yes, each representative of each municipality has submitted a letter indicating an absence of any undue burden on public facilities. That's the required.
And you already have those letters in hand?
I do.
Okay, and so this gets to, okay, so, now the new document that was submitted today, justification document or what, is that available to the public? Will that be available to the public?
I haven't fully reviewed it, but
Okay.
if as long as there's nothing proprietary in there, which, so if there's proprietary things,
Right.
things may be confidential.
Sometimes there might have to be a redacted version or something like that. I did ask in my email whether there was background document, when I had communicated with you by email, whether there were any documents, and you didn't reply that there were. You didn't actually respond to that question. This gets to a little bit of the difficulty. I mean, not only are we not well versed in the world of finance and public finance, but we're not well versed, in the particular process of this, of fame of this organization. So, or this proposal. So it's hard to come here as a member of the public and make comments on the proposal if we don't have a certain amount of background documentation as to what this is about. So today's session is very helpful, is and will be very helpful, and I will ask to get a copy of that. Now, the letter that the invitation that I saw said letters or documents are accepted through today. Is there also an opportunity to comment in writing after today, or is the comment period closed? As
Comment
of
period,
today?
close to
Comment periods. And then when will I assume that FAME as a board will make a decision on this, or is there a decision-making process that follows this hearing?
being staff generally makes the determinations as to whether or not to approve the certificate of
Okay, thank you. I will say that this very broad-ranging request for capital funding, in my view, works against the process of determining state solid waste management policy that's underway right now in the legislature. And in this session, anyone who's been paying attention to the session knows that there's been, a huge number of very important issues that have taken up legislative time. The Environment and Natural Resources Committee, my understanding of it, and we followed it a bit, but of course, we don't always have the last word. They basically tabled or didn't take up any major solid waste bills this session, this is part of the session, because they wanted, the general sense of the committee was that they would want to go back and revisit state waste management policy on a very broad-based basis before the January term coming up. And they have some sessions scheduled where they're going to do that. And in a sense, it feels like this kind of broad-based support for business, it looks like expansion, but certainly support for all of Casella's ongoing operations, including some new operations, I think in a sense closes the door, has a possibility of closing the door on what the future waste policy might be coming out of the legislature. And I think that the committee is very serious about taking a look. There are other organizations right now that are taking a look. And for this to be approved at this time, in a sense, preempts or gets a jump on, let's say, a more comprehensive waste policy process that's underway. That's one, one comment. Really the only existing state policy now is in the statutory waste management hierarchy. The reduce, reuse, recycle, compost, incinerate, and landfill at the bottom. And there's quite a bit of concern among waste industry participants and among the public as to the let's say huge expansion that already has been attempted to be approved from Casella, a 20 million cubic yard expansion in Old Town. They now have a public benefit determination that says a little less than 10 million would be okay now. There will be another 10 or 12 million presumably sometime in the future according to materials they presented. Waste policy in Maine, the hierarchy of waste policy is toward stopping materials from going into landfills. The business plan of Casella is to channel material to go into landfills. Not only to channel it to go into landfills, but to channel certain kinds of degradable materials into landfills that really don't belong there, with the idea of creating these waste to gas energy production. And so the landfill becomes, in a sense, not part of a waste disposal business strategy, but it becomes a waste to gas business proposal. This is really the direction that a lot of people who are looking at statewide policy think is a wrong direction. And I think that this kind of overall endorsement, let's say by FAME or by any part of the state, is in a way undermining to really getting a hold of reducing these waste streams, keeping them out of the landfills, and putting all of the recyclables and the organics to more positive use than they can be just deteriorating our landfill. So, my feeling is that this is an endorsement, that it's corporations often go to the legislature or to other state agencies and get a stamp of approval. They can leverage that in other ways. Possibly this can add to marketability. Having some of this funding in place might increase their ability to market some of their operations if they tend to maybe want to get rid of those operations. So my feeling is that, from what I can understand of this, and obviously I don't have a deep understanding of exactly what's being done here, but I think it really does work against the potential, after many years of stirring around on this, the potential of getting a statewide waste management plan in place that would include all of the major waste processors and facility managers. Some of them are public corporations or quasi-public, like Echo Maine in Portland, and like the operation in Lewiston, Auburn. And I think that if one of your criteria is how this affects policy and the future of waste management in Maine, I would say take a very close look and maybe do some more due diligence before approving this, because I think that it seems to be a move by Casella to, in a sense, close the door to some of the more positive statewide changes that could be made and that are on the table.
Are you suggesting it's not, the current system is not in compliance with the state solid waste management plan?
Well, yes, actually I am, because the idea of a large expansion of Juniper Ridge based on putting raw garbage in there and other things that are going to decompose, and then having another expansion in the future really goes against, that is the last item on the solid waste hierarchy, which is landfilling. And landfilling, we only really have the Juniper Ridge landfill, and then there's a private landfill in Norwich Rock, but it's a state resource that is absolutely renewable, right? It's a resource that's there and that should be operated in a way that it can be used for many, many years. And there, actually, although the claim is that this is apples and oranges, and we've discussed this in the past, in Portland, they're managing their landfill on a zero growth basis. And there's no reason, Casella's business plan is to put as many dollars worth of garbage into their landfill at the end of the pipe as possible, actually as fast as they can do it as possible, so they can open up a new expansion and then do the same thing again. All of this works against the solid waste hierarchy, of which the very bottom rung is landfill. So, yeah, I would say that supporting this plan, to the extent that this financing supports their proposed expansions at Juniper Ridge, it really does not only undermines the hierarchy in general, but it undermines even the ability to get to a place where the hierarchy can be implemented on a more long-term sustainable basis. Thanks very much for taking time to hear us. Thank you.
Can I raise one more point? It'll be a statement.
Oh, and by the way, if there's I suppose I can leave my address so that a copy of this could be mailed to me?
Sure.
Thank you.
I want to.
State your name again.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm Sam Hunting. I'm from Orono, Maine. I drink the still water in the Penobscot. I'm reading the legal advertisement, and I'm trying to figure out how I went so wrong on what portion of the statute to study, right? Because we did get a copy of, we tried to understand what the revenue obligation securities were, and that doesn't have a whole lot to do, as it turns out, with these conduits or whatever they are, right? And therefore, I want to challenge the legal advertisement. I, as a member of the public, read paragraph 2 and tried to understand it, right? Apparently, it's paragraph 3, section 10-43, that's the relevant portion. And, you know, I don't know if there's like a term of art for a legal advertisement that sends the public in the wrong direction. If so, I'd like to challenge it, because I would have been better prepared if I had understood better what I needed to read. Thank you.
Anyone else who'd like to speak in opposition to the project? Hearing none, are there any who would like to speak neither for nor against the project? Very well, there being none, this concludes the hearing. The authority will consider the application and materials and comments submitted at the hearing and issue its decision shortly. Thank you for your attention.
Excuse me, you have a copy of this in the paper?
I thought it didn't take part of it. I wanted to take here to frame.